Dungeons and Dragons, the real deal. Not many people play Dungeons and Dragons the way it's meant to be played. Some friends of mine over on Twitter are playing the greatest AD&D campaign the world has ever seen. And it's the greatest campaign because it has been run according to this sacred document. They are using the rules as they are written, and it is absolutely astonishing how many problems of modern D&D it solves. And I say they're playing it as it's meant to be played because by ordering things as they should be, the game first, campaign next, and your participants thereafter, you're playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as it was meant to be. Right? As it was meant to be. And that's what they're doing here by putting, and here's where we're going to emphasize, the game first. So they're playing the game according to these rules. Then this wonderful campaign. And then the players, which means they have a rotating stable of players. They are using one-to-one time, and they are not pulling away from the rules that make the gross, smelly nerds sweat even harder than they usually do, like encumbrance and training costs and all that stuff. Now, the problem that they've run into is that they have a very complicated scenario, and they said, hey, Mr. Wargaming, you're the world's foremost authority on chainmail. Can you use chainmail to resolve this sticky situation that has organically evolved over the course of our campaign? Because I'm a bros before hoes kind of guy, I had to tell my little harem, you guys got to, back off for a little while, and while I do something for my buddies. And that is what today's video is. Now, it's not going to be a full live play because this is a really complicated situation. I will be taking photographs as I go and as I resolve this very complicated mess that they have presented me. And then we'll come back and I'll show you the slideshow and I'll essentially narrate what happens on a turn-by-turn basis. Like I said, it's complicated. Before we get to the actual game, though, we need to take a look at the roster, the order of battle that at least this DM, bear in mind, this campaign is kind of a multiversal campaign. This campaign here has multiple DMs operating multiple groups, and they are running faction play. And by faction play, now I don't know who's running this faction over here. These are the Hobgoblins. The Hobgoblins have recruited some giant friends to help them raid the Thark camp. So the Tharks are going to be in green. The Hobgoblins are going to be in purple. I'm using proxy figures for a lot of these because I don't have any Thark. They don't make Tharks in 2 millimeters. So I'm using my Orc figures for the Tharks, and I'm using my Undead figures for the Hobgoblins. Let's take a look at that roster of battle. The order of battle that you're looking at right here is we'll start with the Tharks. And as you can see, we've got 200 Thark infantry, 100 cavalry, 100 mounted, and 100 Thark archers. So looking at the armies now, and using a 1:25 ratio. Let's zoom in a little bit tighter here. What we're looking at are 8 Thark infantry, 4 cavalry, and we're going to count those as medium horse. We've got 4 heavy horse, that's the guys in the chariots, and then 4 units of archers. Now, because of their special ability, they are able to shoot at the longbow range ×2. We're going to be modifying the chainmail rules in order to account for the special abilities of these guys. These are going to be armored infantry, heavy cavalry, medium cavalry, heavy cavalry. Tharks are a lot tougher than your average Hobgoblin. This does not look like a fair fight on paper. The other thing that the Tharks have going for themselves is that they have a ballista. We're using some cannons for those. They have a trebuchet. They have a unit of goblin buffalo riders. Now, these guys are a little bit wonky because they're pretty inexperienced. They're going to count as light cavalry, and every turn when they want to move, they have to roll a d6, and on a 5 or 6, they'll move in a random direction. The goblins have not quite figured out how to use these guys yet. And otherwise, they will count as light infantry. And then they have a ornithopter. Now, I don't have an ornithopter figure. I am using one of my dire riders. All these figures are from Irregular Miniatures. There's one other stand that's a little weird. That's this unit of buffalo that we're going to put over behind the white card here as a camp. And we're going to put the buffalo herd somewhere out there. The buffalo riders can use the herd and direct them. If they can get over to them, they can charge them into a mess or a melee to kind of add more confusion. As if that wasn't enough, the Tharks have 5, and I'm going to add one more. They have 4, well, if we look at the order of battle, they have 9 cargo skiffs that can each hold 50 Tharks. And then they have one assault skiff that can hold both the trebuchet and the ballista. Now, the ballista can be used on a turn where the skiff moves. The trebuchet cannot. And the trebuchet can fire any turn. Again, these are radium rifle armed green Martians, right? So unlike a regular catapult, this catapult can fire every turn unless this skiff moves, all right? The skiffs back here can hold, like we said, 50. Well, now because I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio, they can hold up to 100 of these guys. In other words, 4 stands can fit into a single one of these skiffs. Like I said, I need one more skiff. We'll get to that. They are in camp when dawn rises. They have just finished looting the ballista and the trebuchet from this ruined village. This is a ruined village. The whole stand will count as a defensible point. It blocks line of sight, and when you fight in this, if you are inside and they are assaulting it, we're going to treat that as increasing your class by 1 and the opponent's class by 1 as well. In the case of archers, you will cut the number of archers firing into this ruins by half. On the other side of the battle, you've got the raiding party. The raiding party on paper is grossly outclassed. These hobgoblins are all much lighter armed troops. They're part of 2 different clans. Now, unlike orcs, which will attack each other on sight, they will cooperate, but they won't serve in the same unit. So we're looking at 2 different clans. We're looking at the Gnars, which are composed of 2 heavy infantry and 1 heavy infantry with spear. The flayers have 5 units of heavy spearmen, 2 units of longbow, and 3 units of heavy foot. So heavy foot, so you can tell the difference between the spearmen, they're in the big blocks, and the footmen, the wild chargers, are right here. Now, in total, you've got 20 Thark stands of troops. In addition to the ornithopter and the heavy artillery and the extra, they're all much heavier troops than these lighter armed hobgoblins. If we look at the order of battle, if you look at the actual AD&D stats, these guys are doomed, except that they are backed up by some heavy hitters of their own. They have the only spellcaster. That's the druid here, and his name is Tense Water. They have a hero in the form of their leader, Grok, who is a hero general. Fights as 4 foot, +1 to morale for everybody around him. And then they do have 1 armored foot that serves as the guard for their general. However, they are backed up by some heavy, heavy hitters. They've got 3 hill giants. Now, I'm using guerrillas. Again, I don't have any proxy units that would work as good hill giants. Hill giants are fairly cave type, so I'm going to use the giants for those. And then they've got 5 fire giants. And fire giants I'm going to be using, because the red cloaked guys, they're ratmen, I know, but I wanted to use red. And when we zoom out pretty far, the red will show up better, and it won't matter that the ratmen, I know fire giants are bigger than the hill giants, but whatever. The hill giants are fat, they take up more real estate. And all of these guys are going to be able to throw boulders. In turns where they don't move, they can throw boulders up to 10 inches. The hobgoblins, for their part, are not here to take casualties. They want to steal skiffs. The Tharks are not aware of that. They just believe they're under attack. So that's going to color things as well. Add all of that together and you get a very complicated situation. If you were to try to run this in any version of D&D whatsoever, you would run into all kinds of problems where the rules are not designed to resolve this kind of scenario. There have been a number of attempts to shoehorn mass battle combats, some better than others, additional sets of rules that will work. Second edition had the battle system, for example. There was a cheap version of Chainmail available with third edition. A lot of OSR third parties have tried to implement paper-based methods of resolving a situation like this. Notably, in Aaron Alston's Rules Compendium, he had a set of instructions that you could follow to resolve this on paper, none of which work as well as Chainmail. Now, before we roll initiative, we should point out This is a bit of a round peg square hole situation in that we've had to make some translation decisions. How do you translate from AD&D back to chainmail? It's very simple, particularly when when you've got a situation where you've got elite troops like the Tharks over here, who are one for one grossly outclass the Hobgoblins. The Tharks up in the corner here, in tabletop RPG terms, have 3 times the hit points and do twice the damage. In chainmail terms, we're going to take a much more abstract approach and say, yeah, okay, they're tougher. That means that these are armored foot compared to medium foot. And if we wanted to go one step further, we could even make these guys lightfoot. We don't. As the sun begins to creep over the horizon, the Hobgoblins come spilling out of the wooded hills that they used to screen their advance. Unfortunately for them, Tharks are not stupid. They did have a skiff out patrolling the area. They saw this large body of troops. We're talking about something like 300 troops plus 8 giants. You're not going to hide that through the woods for very long. The Tharks are ambushed. They're not entirely ready for this fight, but they're also not caught entirely with their lack of pants down. So what I've done for initial deployment is I've put the 1 unit coming out of each side of the camp. In this case, it's their cavalry, their heavy cavalry, and heavy cavalry is coming out of the north side, and their foot troops are coming out of the west side. Their plan is to send the goblin buffalo riders over to roust this herd of buffalo in that direction, to just sow some confusion up there. Remember, they're fighting on the defense. They want to slow these guys down. They're going to put their medium foot, are going to race for the cover of the walls here, while their archers and heavy ballista mount up. That's going to take a full turn in the camp before they can go anywhere. Their plan is to use their greater firepower to get across the river. And they've got ranges that can reach across most of the battlefield and pick off these giants from safety. For their part, the Hobgoblins coming out of the hills have kind of anticipated that. They've put their raiding force down here, and if they can get into the camp, they can get a couple of guys into the camp and spend a turn loading up any of those skiffs. Or if they can even just knock the skiffs out of the sky and control the battlefield, they may be able to repair those skiffs, right? The Tharks are trying to protect the skiffs. They're trying to catch the skiffs. Now, this is not the kind of scenario that you typically see in a tabletop battle. You could sit down and write something this complicated, but how much more fascinating when there are real people that have spent months positioning their factions into this situation, where for the part of the Hobgoblins, they thought they could sneak off and have a successful raid to steal a few skiffs at the cost of some chumps. And the Tharks thinking they could get some free ballista and heavy artillery to protect their camp. Fascinating scenario. I'm really looking forward to playing this, but there's one other thing I want to tell you that I've done. In order to distinguish between the hill giants and the fire giants, these hill giants can be killed with just 8 hits. They do defend as armored foot, as do the hill giants, but they only need 8 casualties before they go down, and the hill giants need 12. The Ornithopter over here for the Tharks shoots as 10 bowmen. And I think that's it. I think I'm ready to get going and see how this scenario plays out. Let us begin, as we begin all things D&D, by rolling for initiative. The brown die will be for the Hobgoblins. The green die will be for the Greenskin Martians. The Martians get the initiative. And as I said, they're going to spend most of this turn loading up their camp and repositioning their forces. The medium cavalry over here will be able to make contact. Well, we got to roll a d6 to see what, on a 5 or a 6, they move a random direction. They do not. So the player has full control, and they're going to move down here. The key strategic decision that the Thark commander has to make is whether to preserve as much of his force as possible or not. He has to spend a turn getting his troops to the skiffs, which are behind the camp, and then another turn loading them up, and then another turn moving them into position. It's going to be turn 3 before they'll have any impact on the game. Alternatively, they can come out of the camp and start having impact almost immediately. The issue here with the strategy of loading all of the archers up, is that he can also preserve 100 of his infantry by loading them up into one of the skiffs and then zooming around. He may be able to drop them off in the backfield of the hobgoblins to cut them off. Or he can just cut his losses and preserve them for future use. This is where campaign games are very different from one-off games. The loss of this entire force to a simple raid would be devastating for the Thark player. And as a neutral third party, I don't want to do that to the guy. So at a minimum, they are likely to escape with all of their heavy shooters, even if their infantry take it on the chin. They've already moved one infantry out into the village. The question is what to do with this other infantry. And for this, I'm going to take the coward's way out and trust the dice. On a 1, 2, or a 3, the Thark commander says, no, I'm pushing them out, and I'm going to try to put as much hurt on those giants as possible. Because even if he loses his infantry, if the other player loses 3 or 4 giants, he's going to be hurting moving forward as well. So on a 1, 2, 3, the infantry are going to move to load up. All right, there you go. He's taking the safe way out. A man after my own heart. So we're going to put 4 infantry into this ornithopter, and I'm not going to put all 3 because it just doesn't work. Y'all know there's 100 infantry in there, and this is our assault craft that after next turn will be able to fire. I think we're done with movement on their side. Let's look at the entire battlescape now. For his part, Grok has opted to leave his archers on the hills in cover to cover the retreat of anybody that's leaving. If these heavy cavalry wind up chasing any units off the board, they're going to have to deal with those guys too. He is bringing his Nasher clan. Well, let me just double check, make sure I got that right. Is it Nashers? Is that the smaller group? The smaller group is the Nars. Yep, Nars with Chief Grok. So the chief is in the middle. Everybody over here gets a +1 on their on all of their morale dice. Of course, the giants don't take morale dice. So he's got a force over here that's going to try to kind of sweep around the corner and get into this area to steal 1 or 2 of the skiffs, which are currently loading up. So they may need to be shot down out of the sky. We'll see. Maybe what we'll do is we'll declare that if these guys can get into the camp, they will be able to loot 1 to 4 of the skiffs that are left over. Because, as I said, we're doing a 1 to 2 on the skiffs. That means there will be 4 skiffs left. In fact, that's what it is. There's got to be 4 skiffs in the camp, so these guys can get out of here. They're not loading up. The drivers are with them, or, whatever. You get the idea, right? As you can see, the goblins, buffalo riders, have managed to move into this area, so whether these buffaloes are activated or not is going to be critical, because we'll see whether they can deploy. And then I made one little tweak. Rather than putting all of the giants in one place, we spread them out a little bit more with some hill giants protecting our general, so that Grok has some big boys on his side, and then again down here on this kind of right flank, quick raiding force trying to get around the back. Boy, they really could have used some cavalry down there, couldn't they? As far as shooting is concerned, this is where things get a little more interesting. The ornithopter has a range of 15 inches, so he can hit anybody over here. Who's he going to shoot at? And he's going to have to, we're going to treat these as a single unit. So the druid did move this turn. So next turn he can cast a spell. We'll talk about that next turn. But for right now, it's just the general with this unit of armored foot, and the giants are going to be as 1. We've got a total of 10 shots that are going to be fired against fully armored foot. 10 is only going to do 1 wound and another wound on a 5 or 6. So he does manage to deliver 2 wounds to this unit here, and it'll be 2 wounds on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he does 2 wounds to the infantry there. That armored infantry, and we did treat him as armored infantry, have been reduced to half strength now. Which is bad, because Grok is, if they take 2 more, Grok then has a potential for taking a casualty. I think that is the only shooting that we have available this turn. Moving on to the next turn, we have to roll for initiative. And this time, the Hobgoblins get it. At the conclusion of movement, what we have is the Druid, Tense Water, is holding still. He's casting a spell this turn. Can't cast and move. The Goblin Buffalo Riders tried to move the Buffalo. The Buffalo moved in a random direction, and they ran straight into the camp. That's going to be a problem for everyone. There are now a herd of wild buffaloes stampeding through the camp. No more loading or unloading of any skiffs, at least until those guys are dealt with. Now, the only shooting we have, basically what happened on this turn is the Hobgoblins have moved up in a line. The cavalry for the Tharks have charged into combat to buy the shooters a little more time. And these guys have stayed behind the protective walls of their fortress. Remember, they still don't know what's going on here. The only shooting we have is on the part of the Ornithopter and effectively the Druid. Because the Druid has initiative, he's going to get his spell off first, and we need to look at how Chainmail handles spells, something we haven't done here on the channel. We are translating loosely. Now, the beautiful thing about using Chainmail is it perfectly merges. We could easily kick back to resolve this spell casting on the AD&D rules. But instead, because we're using this as an excuse to show how easy Chainmail really is, you take a look. We've got a 7th level Druid. He is classed as a sorcerer, which means he has a range. He can fire up to 30 inches. Remember, you got to cut these distances in half. 30 inches covers the entire board. And then you look at the complexity of the spell. Now, there's no blindness spell. He's going to try to cast blindness on the Ornithopter to eliminate it from the battle. That means that he has a spell, because he's shooting at a guy who is... Now, let me back up a step. The spells listed in Chainmail are all mass battle spells. So you have things like slowness. 20 figures move at 1/2 speed. 20 figures, man, that's 5 whole... that's 5 stands. That slows everybody down half speed for 2 turns, right? And that's complexity 3. There's also a darkness spell that puts darkness over the entire battlefield, meaning that only those units that can see in the darkness can attack or defend. Might be that's great for a large battle, but in a one-on-one battle like this, you could just drop back into the AD&D rules, and he gets the spell off. Check your range. This is why AD&D and even games like Moldve, Basic Expert, use inches for movement, because they're assuming that you are playing a war game, which if you're playing D&D, you are playing a war game, aren't you? At any rate, we're going to stick with Chainmail as best as possible. It's a one-on-one. The Ornithopter is just a pilot, kind of more expansive, more advanced and expert. We're going to call that a complexity level 2 spell. So check your chart. For a complexity level spell 2, if you are a magician, if you are what did we say? He's a sorcerer, and it's an immediate effect. You need a 6-up in order to have it take effect. So we grab our dice, and look at that. The Ornithopter is now blind, which means he cannot shoot, and he is going to move in a random direction. Now, he can be shot at. If he drifts over the hills, these archers may be able to shoot him down. Unfortunately for the Hobgoblins, or alternatively, that's a great point. Each of these giants moved, so they can't throw a rock, but on any turns where they don't move, they can huck rocks. Got to remember that. Then we have to resolve some combats, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that off screen. So let's take a look at these battle results. Up here in the north, the heavy cavalry, to no one's surprise, have chased off the relatively lightly armored heavy foot. They could not pursue because they are currently locked in combat also with a heavy giant who delivered 2 casualties in exchange for just 1 on himself. That fire giant is saving these guys. These are the complexities, and this is why we want to do the Chainmail version. The fire giant, now in this area, we've got some interesting things happening. The fire giant has some guys backing him up. He could win this fight on his own, except that these Tharks can come out of the city. Except that there are still 4 other fire giants and a couple of hill giants. In the south, likewise to no one's surprise, the cavalry for the Tharks have begun to chase off. Now, the results of this combat were a simple retreat on the part of these spearmen. The cavalry now has to decide, do they race back to protect the camp, or do they chase these guys off to put them out of the fight for good? So those are the key decision points. Now, we've got a lot of flyers that are ready to enter the battle as well. So although the Hobgoblins have pushed up pretty far, this is where the Tharks are going to start to get back some of their own. Before they can do that, though, we need to roll for initiative and see who goes first. The Tharks really want to go first, and the Hobgoblins get it. So the Hobgoblins now, they may tell the Tharks, no, why don't you go? I want to see where you're going to wind up before I commit anybody. For their part, the Tharks are going to close in. They're going to close in and see what they can do about this giant over here. And then these heavy foot are going to stay right where they're at and pin down some of these giants. Things get complicated enough over here in the Thark camp for me to slow things down and show you. The two skiffs of shooters have moved off in this direction. They're looking to sweep the field from their left to right. Since they moved, they cannot shoot during the movement phase. They will get shoot during the shooting phase. The Buffalo Riders have moved up to here to see if they can get these guys out of the camp. That's all they can do this turn. We need to figure out where the Ornithopter goes. But before we do, I'll mention that this is our skiff full of 100 infantry. 4 stands of infantry are racing across to get into the backfield of the giants and start sweeping things from that direction. Now, as far as the Ornithopter goes, he's going to be blinded for 2 turns. And on this first turn, he's going to move 5 inches to the 3. So he moves directly over the camp. If he moves off he's going to be blind next turn as well. If he moves off the table, he's out of the game. If he moves into a good shooting position next turn, and again, there's nobody, well, I guess there are people that can shoot at him, except, well, back up a step. Giants that move can't throw rocks. A giant that stands still can start throwing rocks at the Ornithopter. So that's the other thing he has to contend with. Now, of course, all of our giants have moved. As you can see, Fire Giant 2 has moved up to support his bro. 2 of the Fire Giants have moved to pin these guys into place, and we've got 2 Hill Giants and a Fire Giant that are still committed to getting into the camp and stealing as many skiffs as possible. We have 1 combat that we have to deal with for now, and then we have some shooting. This movement is the last thing we need to resolve. On a 1, 2, or a 3, the Thark cavalry will continue to pursue the battered Hobgoblins. Now, the Hobgoblin spearmen have reformed. That's all they've done this turn. On a 1, 2, or a 3, they are going to continue the charge. On a 4, 5, or a 6, they are going to charge back towards these guys over here. So on a 4, they opt to leave these guys, and they're going to wheel about, which costs them half movement. And then they do have a movement of... They might have been better off just wiping out that unit. Cavalry, the medium horse, have a movement of... Medium horse, 12 inches. So they are, as long as they're within 6 inches, and they are, so they are going to close... And we'll have another combat to deal with down here. We'll come at them from this direction, and we'll just line them up like so. So they have now stopped this raiding party from successfully flanking. The combat down here in the south is a wash. If you add up all of the... Now, there's a little bit of wonkiness going on here because Hill Giants never check for morale. So I'm basically giving them a bonus in their morale that these guys are bolstered by the presence of... Oh, you know what I forgot, though? You know what I forgot? These guys got hit in the back, so they don't get a counterattack. So there's no wounds. That's what it is. They don't get to counterattack. They took a total of 3 wounds from this charge, and on the next turn, they'll be able to turn around and deliver blows, but not this time. That's what happened down there. If we look up in the northern portion of the battlefield, remember they just recovered, we had a total of 3 hits on each of these. That's what the blue wound markers are for. 3 hits on each of these fire giants, who again, they do not have any morale checks. They were able to do 2 hits in return on the heavy cavalry. This might not be as fair a fight as I expected. If you run the numbers, what winds up happening when you've got 2 giants? Now, they're fighting as 12 heavy foot when they attack. Those guys are normally they would roll 24 dice, but because they're attacking heavy horse, they only get to roll 1 die for every 4 of those. So they roll 6 dice, hitting on 6s. They only did 1 damage this time around. Likewise, down here, they had an easier go of things because they're attacking what amount to armored foot. They were able to do 4 damage to the guys in the town at the cost of only 2 hits to themselves. In 4 turns, they're going to be able to lay waste to this town. All right, so that's it for the morale. But these Tharks are not going to leave the safety of the confines of these ruined walls. They're just going to have to take that as long as they can. In the meanwhile, our flyers are now out of position to shoot. Well, this guy has that 45-foot range, or 45 degrees, and he can shoot 15 inches. So 10, so they will be able to take shots at these spearmen down here. And 10 archers firing at heavy foot are going to be able to do 3 damage. So we'll drop a 3 down there. And this is where I think this may prove critical. We're done with a turn. Everybody that can move has moved. We have to roll for initiative. And these guys can now get back in the fight on this turn as well. So let's roll to see. The green means the Tharks have the initiative again. And we're going to roll to see if the goblins can gain control of that buffalo herd. On a 5 or a 6, they can. They've got control, so they can send them out in any direction. And they'll send them out front, but because they spent this turn getting control, on the next turn, we're going to roll again to see which direction the buffalo, if they can actually control the direction the buffalo move. All they've done is gathered them up and gotten control of the camp again. The other thing we're going to do is roll for our Ornithopter's second turn of blindness. He's going to move 6 inches to the 9, which will put him in the 9 o'clock direction. 6 inches puts him right there. So he's now vulnerable to rocks being thrown by the giants. However, remember that our ornithopters can move a grand total of, I think is it 15 inches each turn? Let me just look that up real quick. They can move 9 inches each turn. So we're going to bring, these guys are going to pivot to here. Well, are they? No, they're going to take their first fire and do 3 more damage against this unit here. So 3 eliminates 1, 2, 3. These are the guys that have the option of moving into a better firing position by pivoting and coming up to here. And then they're going to be able to start raining hot death down on this unit here. And remember how we've grouped it. There's a 1/3 chance you hit the giants and a 1/3 chance you hit the leader. That, I think, is it for movement for the Tharks. So the result of the melee, this unit of flayers down here just quit the field. They ran off. Zoop! There's nobody back there to stop them, so they will be available in future campaign events. The rest of these guys have stuck around. They're sticking out the fight. Up here, we had a very similar situation. The Tharks have lost another 1/4 of their unit in exchange for just doing 1 wound on each of these fire giants. Fire giants are deadly. Down here, these fire giants are really starting to take it on the chin. Now, notice that Tense has moved up here. He may be able to cast Cure on one of these guys next turn. But the heavy cavalry for the Tharks are still sticking around. They're still game. The last thing we need to resolve here is missile fire. You may think there's none, but there is. Remember, this mobile skiff did not move. So the trebuchet can fire at Grok himself. And that's what this is for right here. Now, when you fire a catapult, you name your location, and then we have to do 2 things. It might scatter. We're going to roll 2d6. The green die is going to be the number of inches it overshoots, and the brown die undershoots. So it overshoots by 6 inches, undershoots by 4, and winds up landing right in the camp. Oh, which is where all of our buffalo and goblin riders are. They have not found the range, so because they're in the camp, what I'll do is I'll give the goblins a let's call it a 5-up save, or let's call it, because they're in the camp, let's call it a 4-up save. On a 4-up, nothing happens. There you go. Nothing happens. Otherwise, we might have done like D6 wounds to either the buffalo riders or the buffalo herd. And that is the end of the turn. Grok is now just one turn away from the camp. If he can win this initiative roll, he can get into the camp. And he does not, which means he's going to have to deal with... is there anybody that can stop him? Well, alternatively, the Tharks could say, yeah, go ahead, because they know they've got 20 cavalry worth of, or one stand of light goblin buffalo riders in the camp. We're probably wondering why they're being shot at right now, but be that as it may, it gives them the option of getting these buffalo out of the camp. That means we got to roll that D6. On a 5 or a 6, the buffalo move in a random direction. It's a 5. That means the buffalo are going to move on the clock face 2d6 inches. And they're going to move in the direction of 5 inches, so they're going to wind up racing off in this direction. So they wind up just adding to the confusion and really not having a whole lot of say over the fight. We will bring our shooters down to now shoot into their own camp, is what they're planning on doing. Because these guys are going to wind up moving in. Likewise, the Ornithopter can slide on over here, and we'll see what kind of damage they can do in there. I think that's about it. We've got 4.5 inches. Remember the goblins? Well, no, they're not going to move just yet. We have to talk about what these guys are going to do. These Tharks are going to... Do they disembark? If they disembark, they're going to be attacked while disembarking by this crew. Alternatively, this crew may decide that they're going to race up into the camp as well. If they begin to disembark here, what would they do? They're a little out of position. The idea is they wanted to stay out of bowfire range of these guys. This cavalry is doing a pretty good job on their own. Do they want to fight as light infantry and have to face these spears? Well, these spears are going to have to take the full turn to disembark. Yeah, they're safe. They're going to disembark. So we'll bring these 3 guys out. And I'm assuming they've got a skiff driver. But we'll leave that skiff here. So if something weird happens, that skiff might be lost as well. Essentially what we've done is we've disembarked these guys and forced these spearmen to turn around to face them. That's all those Hobgoblin spearmen can do. They realize that there's somebody in their backfield. If these guys can get up here, they threaten the Thark. Oh no, that's to protect their flank too, isn't it? But it forces these 10 figures to turn around instead of heading for the camp. And of course, our leader now is, he's exhausted. I am keeping track of exhaustion. At 4.5 inches, they're going to get into the camp. They're now classed as in cover. We'll talk about that when we get to the shooting range. But I think we're done with all of our movement at this point. Everybody is gone. The only other people that could maybe go are we could bring these archers off the hill to assist with these guys. If these Tharks win, then we can start taking some pot shots at them with the Hobgoblins. But I kind of think those archers are still best off just protecting this pass so that the skiff riders can get out of dodge. This is where I'm putting all the units that have fled the field. At the end of the combat, what has happened down here, the combat phase, what's happened down here is that we have one of the light cavalry units stands has now been decimated. They're down to 25% of their starting strength. And that means, do we have an insta deck check? You know what I haven't been doing is morale for those charges. When you get charged by cavalry, you're supposed to roll to see if they pass the morale. So forgive me for that oversight. The insta deck check down here for, what is it? For medium horse, it's a 3rd, so they haven't hit that point yet. But they did lose 1 unit. Now, one of the things that I've been doing wrong, so they're still locked in combat. This hill giant is fortifying. There's no morale checks because the giant is engaged. This heavy foot with the spears has only taken one wound. They don't have to check yet. On this fight up here, now one of the things I realized that I was doing wrong with these giants up here, I was spreading the hits evenly among the giants and consolidating hits on stands for their enemies. That's a mistake. If the giants are wiping out full stands, then all of the hits should be on one of the giants, and that's what I've done down here. One of these fire giants dies to the heavy horse. Consolidating all the hits means that this now fire giant, backed up by the druid, is on his own fighting these heavy horse. So we'll run through that on the next turn. But the last thing we have to do, because we've done all of our melee, notice that this skiff is now emptied. The last thing we have to do, and ready to fight with these hobgoblins, we got to resolve what happens here in the camp. This is where it gets exciting. We've got 2, 4, plus 10 effective archers firing down into the camp. Oh yeah, because the Buffalo Riders are out here now. So those 14 guys are firing down into a, call it, fortified position, right? Tents, there's cover. Which means we're going to treat the guys in there as armored foot. So we look at this chart right here. And if you've got 14 archers firing at fully armored foot, they're going to do 2 wounds, and on a 5 or 6, they'll do a third. They do a total of 3 wounds. And in this case, our big boss is got 2 giants that are running cover for him. So I'm going to roll for all 3. And on a 1 or a 2, it's a hit here. On a 3 or a 4, and on a 5 or a 6, it'll be here. So everybody takes 1 hit, which saves the life. If all 3 of these had come up 3s and 4s, it would have killed Grok himself. As it is, our giants each take a hit, and we're going to do that again next turn. And each of these hill giants takes a hit, because it's the next turn where Grok is going to be loading up his giants and his troops onto those skiffs. That's it for this turn. Now we roll for initiative. Green is the Tharks. And this time, Grok gets the initiative. So he's going to be able to load into the skiffs before anybody can take a shot at him. And I want to go ahead and do those 3 shots again. Not only that, but this guy is going to pile in. He can move 4.5 inches. And he gets into camp as well. Now, he's not going to be able to load into the skiff, but he adds 1 more guy. Well, first of all, let's see if we do the 3 hits or not. We don't. It's just 2 hits. So we're going to roll 2 dice. And this time, I'm going to re-roll 6s. It's going to go 1, 2, Grok, 5, 6, re-rolling 6s. So on a 4 and a 6, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. So a 4th hit wipes out Grok's bodyguard. And that 6 puts a 2nd wound on this hill giant right here. But the 2 hill giants and Grok are now loaded into the skiffs. So we've done the camp and the shooters. No, we have a ballista here that's going to rotate, and he can fire in the fire phase as well. In fact, all these guys are going to have to do 1 more fire phase over there. The only other movement we've got is this charge right here, these guys coming to horns, and then these archers say, hey, look, free skiff. So they come down off the hill. They're going to be able to make contact with this next turn. If they could have a full turn in contact with a skiff, the hobgoblins might be able to get away with 2 more. Probably should have left the guy over here, but we'll see what happens with this fight. Might not be an issue. In fact, they might have lulled these guys off so they can, so that they could pound them. We'll see. Let me run some combats. We'll be right back. All right, the giants go down. The hobgoblins have now lost 2 fire giants. The Tharks won this melee pretty handily. They chased off the spearmen. They used their last bit of movement up to there. They are now out of position. So now the question becomes, I think that's the end of the turn. And then down here, likewise, we had a couple of spearmen. Oh, so the spearmen ran away, actually. Those spearmen raced off in this direction. They were removed from the fight. So there's more survivors, but badly injured. Then we're down here, and likewise, they're just fighting to a stalemate. Where this gets interesting is initiative on this turn, and I'll show you why. The Tharks really have to win the initiative so they can get back out of range of this fire giant. Otherwise, they're going to lose a couple of more skiffs. and they fail. The orcs, excuse me, the hobgoblins say, yup, we're going to go take command of that skiff, and we're going to move this giant 4.5 inches down here to block them from being able to secure this skiff. All of these skiffs are now loaded up. Oh, I forgot to do that. We got to do we do have that last shot. On the last turn, we've got our 14 bows that are firing into here. On a 5 or 6, they'll hit 3 times. So they only hit twice. So I'm going to roll 1, 2. Let's see. Are they focusing on the leader? I got D4s. We're just going to completely randomize who takes those 2 hits. I'm sorry. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going south to north. On a 1, it's the hill giant, and on a 2, it's the fire giant. Each take a hit. And it looks like the only... So fire giant, and now a couple of skiffs, or hill giant. And now our leader and these guys are in a couple of skiffs, so on the next turn, they're going to be able to fly out. Like I said, now, and they won initiative. Well, excuse me, this is the turn where they're loading up, isn't it? So on the last turn, they got in, they took a couple of shots from these guys. They moved in, took a shot in the firing, and then they took another shot during the missile fire phase. Okay, now it is still the hobgoblin's turn to move. And they spent the move here, here, and here. There's nobody else they have to move. Now it's the Tharks' turn to move. They're going to stay where they're at. Oh, I guess this trebuchet had a shot as well. But you're not going to fire a trebuchet into the camp. They don't have anybody else they can shoot at. On the next turn, maybe they could have fired at these guys. That trebuchet has a crazy long range. Those guys were located right here. Let's roll our over-under. Well, we got to declare it, right? Call it 15 inches. So there's 12 to there, and then 15 to here. Pull these guys back 4.5. They were here. Green die is overshot. So they actually went up undershooting to here. They might have hit their own guys. With a 3-inch underfire. No, 3 inches is going to land right there. So, yep, so there was just a missed shot. The trebuchet did take that shot last turn. They will be able to take another shot, see if they can knock it out of the sky. But right now, unless something unusual happens, and I don't think it is, because the Tharks are going to run back to try and secure on their movement. They could charge. They're going to stop right there. They're not going to have enough movement to stop them from getting out of the camp. And I think that's it for movement. So now I have to work my way through some melee. I was wrong. The buffaloes moved in a random direction, and as you can see, I rolled an 8 for the direction. A total of 10 inches is going to bring them... they were over here. It's basically going to bring them up to the walls of the village. So again, sound and fury, signifying nothing, just adding to the general chaos and confusion. And now I can do my melee. This has gone on just long enough. The Tharks are going to blow the horns. We're gonna do what really matters most, and that's going to be, there's no way to stop these guys from getting away with these 2 skiffs. So the first takeaway message is going to be, well, I'll save that for the end. Let's go ahead and do these shooting first. We want to see if Grok takes it in the gut. On a 5 or a 6, they're going to do 3 hits. They only do 2 hits, so I got to roll 2 D4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twice. And on the first one, it's this hill giant takes a hit, and on the second one, this fire giant takes a hit. And now the Tharks have loaded, the hobgoblins have loaded up. They're going to be able to get away with a total of, what did we say? There were 4. It's going to be 2 skiffs down here, and they're going to be able to get away with these 2 skiffs over here. So at the end of the day, here's what we can tell you, right, from moving forward for the campaign. And then when those skiffs break off, the hobgoblins are also going to break off and retreat from the field. And since they were the raiders and the Tharks have taken it on the chin, I think it's safe to allow that. The other thing, the other reason we're kind of doing this is the druid is up here ready to heal this fire giant. So let me reset up our survivors, and I'll show you what the ultimate aftermath is. At the conclusion of my highly scientific and well-calibrated model, it's at least as accurate as any global climate change model, here are the results for the Hobgoblins. They lost 2 fire giants completely dead. They lost a total of 75 spearmen, 75, give or take, of their heavy infantry, their mixed infantry, and Grok's guard fought valiantly to the very end, throwing themselves in front of him, but they were wiped out to a man. Grok was able to escape with a total of 4 skiffs. 4 of the 9. He wasn't able to take the artillery skiff, but that is still a pretty big win for him. I should point out, I don't know what the results of this are in the campaign world. I'm just looking at a little postage stamp. His 3 hill giants have a sixth of their hit points. What would that be? A third and almost half of their hit points are dead, okay? Based on the wound status. So that is the results on the part of the Hobgoblins. Oh, the archers survived as well. And then I honestly, you're going to have to go back and take a look at the replay and see which clans these guys are with, because I don't remember which clans lost spearmen versus mixed infantry. But you should be able to figure that out. Remember that the Gnars were down in the very far south. That was that little flanking maneuver. Now let's take a look at the Butcher's Bill for the Tharks. For the Tharks, the guys you see in the foreground, those are the fallen in battle. 5 out of their 8, so that would be 125 of their warriors fell. They lost 1 cavalry unit, or 25 cavalrymen, and half of their heavy cavalry, that's 50. Everyone else survived. They were able to secure the ballista and the trebuchet, but they also lost 4 of their skiffs. Now remember that those skiffs can only hold 100 people. So each of these, I believe, I got to go back and check the notes, but I think they're going to be in trouble getting everybody home. They might need to make 2 trips, because I don't think they have enough skiffs to transport everyone at this point. I will leave that up to the DM in charge of this little debacle. Remember that what I have presented you is kind of an analysis of how things might have gone, but because I'm not the DM, he may adjust these numbers on his own, or he may tweak them up or down as he sees fit. He may decide that the kind of backhanded way I dealt with fatigue and the skiffs and all of this is just plain wrong. But either way, I had a great time running through a bizarrely complicated scenario that had multiple races of magic creatures, and I would be curious to hear from you guys. If you had to do a scenario this complex and convoluted, what system would you use? I don't know that there's a system better than Chainmail for doing this. There's certainly not one as easy to translate from real D&D onto the tabletop for miniature wargame battles. But as we always say, real D&D is a miniature wargame. Hey, until next time, I'm praying for you.